weeks back, I posted a video about the books I was going to read in September. Well, I've gotten through that entire stack, and I'd like to talk about at least one of them today. And that is The Touch of Darkness, the Persephone and Hades adaptation. I feel like Persephone and Hades is a really popular myth to recreate these days. I don't know why it's gotten such popularity. I mean, I love that it's gotten popularity because it's one of my favorite myths. It has been since, I don't know, I was in high school. I found a book of Greek mythology while I was playing hooky in the library because that's the kind of person I was. I skipped class to go to the library. That's just who I was. In any case, it's been one of my favorites since those days. So I'm happy that everybody else loves it too, and they're all making these versions of the story. But I did have a few issues with this one. Now, I have read a lot of Hades and Persephone fiction and fan fiction, if I admit. There is one very excellent fan fiction that I don't remember the name of right now, based off of the Hercules movie, but just kind of ignores the whole Hercules thing and just goes into Hades and Persephone. It's fantastic. Like, out of all the ones I've read, like published, the ones that people actually get paid to do, it is top 2, top 3, something like that. It's really good. If I can remember and if it still exists, I will dig up the link and put it in the description below. So in any case, let's talk about this book. There's nothing wrong with this book. Let me get that out clear. As an author myself, I hate dissing any book, even if I really didn't like it, because this author put blood and sweat and time into making this book. So I hate telling anybody that I didn't like the book because they put so much effort into it. But this has not been my favorite Hades and Persephone rendition. There were a few things that threw me off, and I think I touched briefly in my overview, like what I'm going to read in September video. But the horns is something that, I don't know, it threw me off. Now, since I'm a writer myself, I believe in the idea that if it's not necessary for the plot, it should not be included. And I don't see where these horns were necessary to the plot at all, unless it's for a later book, which the author had a long arc played out, and the horns are a plot point in a later book. I mean, I'll give a slide for if I read more and I discover that is for the plot. But for this story, at least, I didn't see where they were necessary at all. I mean, one part of the story revolves around the fact that Persephone does not have any magic of her own, that she has to borrow other gods' magics. And why she needs to borrow gods' magic is because gods and goddesses have, they have horns, and they have like this divine glow about them. I think, if I remember correctly, they're taller. In any case, Persephone needs to borrow magic to glamour herself, to hide all of that, so the world can't see that she's actually a goddess. Now, I don't feel like the horns were necessary even in that point, because she still has this divine glow. I think like her eyes glow. It's really obvious, even without the horns, if she doesn't have a glamour on, that she is a goddess. So I don't feel like the horns were necessary there, and I was struggling to find a place where the horns meant something, and every god has a different kind of horn. Like, I think Zeus had ram's horns, and Persephone has like gazelle horns. It was weird, and I didn't understand it, and it didn't feel like it was necessary. It felt like it was only thrown in there to make it unique. And like I said, it's personal preference, especially when you're also an author yourself. It's personal preference how much you put into the story. But for someone like, I don't know, with my writing history, I'm writing books that are way too long, and I have to cut down and cut down and cut down and make them smaller and smaller. So I need to cut out everything that isn't part of the plot. And these horns, had I been writing this story, would have been something I cut, because I only need things in there that are going to further the plot. Like, that they're there for a reason. Otherwise, they're just not important. But, that's my personal preference. And like I said, maybe there is a plot point for these in a later book, and I just don't know about it yet. And if that's the case, then good on the author for doing a long arc. I love those. So the other issues I have with this story seem to be Persephone's own personality. I don't know if personality is the right word here. Persephone has grown up under a very demanding mother, and that seems to be a common trope under this Persephone and Hades retellings, is that Demeter's very overbearing, because she's kept, I mean, it makes sense, right? She's kept her daughter like secluded in this small area, and no one else knows about Persephone. I mean, that is true to the myth, that Demeter lived on the mortal realm and kept her daughter with her, and the other gods didn't come to the mortal realm. I don't know. That's my understanding of the original myth. So it does make sense. I can see where basically everybody pulls that in. But in this Persephone, she's living under a very demanding mother, and Demeter goes from just being an overbearing parent to be almost like, I hesitate to say the word evil because it's so extreme, but just to make it clear, like, Demeter's a little evil. She is very cold, she's uncaring, and she's not much about, she doesn't feel like much like the myth that I'm familiar with. I mean, if you think about it, excuse me, if you think about it, Demeter she loves her daughter so much, and she is so upset that Hades has taken Persephone to the underworld that she basically makes autumn and winter. She says nothing will grow on the earth and snow falls, etc., etc., etc. So there's got to be some kind of caring parent in there somewhere in that myth. But in this book, Demeter is definitely portrayed as almost power hungry and unfeeling, like, I don't know, I get a little serial killer vibe from her. Not that she's killing people, but just that she has that complete lack of empathy for other beings. So that's where the Persephone character is coming from. She's coming from that environment of living with that kind of unempathetic person. So when she comes out into the real world, she's a weird mix of rebellious. She's going to do things her way, which is really the only thing that's going to get the ball rolling in this kind of story once you've painted Demeter that way. But also she's very kind of submissive, and she doesn't think for herself a lot, which I had a problem with. Persephone seems to tread lightly when it comes to other gods. She does have this very defiant front end. Like, she shows that she's rebellious and she's going to do things her way, and she's going to look at things, and she gets into scrapes and meets other people that way. But kind of behind all of that, you get the sense that this Persephone is just looking for approval, which is great. I mean, it fits in with the character, but sometimes the submissiveness of her, or the, like, he doesn't love me, so why would he care about this, sometimes feels like it's taken a little too far. And I'm not sure, I believe this is technically a YA book, so that would fit its audience a little bit, who are stereotypically a little more emotional and like that angst feeling that you get sometimes from those books. But I felt like Persephone, since she has this big rebellious, upfront, in-your-face attitude on the surface, I felt like some of that would be reflected a little bit underneath, and she wouldn't be so, I want to say naive, but I also want to say stupid, about other people's feelings around her, especially towards Hades, who she is, in theory, growing closer to and falling in love with. I mean, love in real life isn't all, I don't know, YA. I don't know how else to describe that. Love in real life is caring and is caring about the other person and being compassionate towards their feelings. But Persephone in this case is all like, oh, he doesn't love me. How could he possibly look at Minth and still love me? He must be sleeping with Minth. I mean, the insecurity there just kind of grated on my nerves sometimes. And while we're talking about Minth, there is one particular line which I didn't highlight and bookmark, which maybe I should have now that I'm actually saying this stuff out loud. But there is one line in particular that I wanted to erase so bad. Early on in the book, well, let's back up a little bit. Does everybody understand who Minth is? Minth is a Greek nymph or semi-goddess. I don't remember which. But she is a lover of Hades, and so obviously she resides in the underworld. But she's also like the creation story for the mint plant, kind of like how Arachne is the creation story for the spider. So in many versions, variations of the myth, Persephone changes Minth into a mint plant because she's upset with her for one reason or another. Now that changes sometimes based on which retelling you're listening to or which version of the myth you're reading, but the general idea is that it's either in retaliation or jealousy. And a lot of these retellings of Persephone and Hades, they take the viewpoint that Minth used to be a lover of Hades, and Persephone was jealous of that and then changed her into a mint plant. Now there are some versions of the myth where Minth is a lover of Hades after Persephone and Hades are already together, and Persephone changes her into a mint plant out of retaliation for "don't you dare sleep with my husband." I don't know why she didn't change her husband into something. I mean, seriously. I mean, he's the one she's really angry at. In any case, that's just my own personal preference there. So there's a line early in the story about how Persephone is so annoyed at Minth for, I don't know, just being Minth, of how this author's portrayed Minth as being, and she wishes she could change her into a plant. Now, I'm not paraphrasing, that is actually the words used, or at least it's pretty close to the words used, and it was so blatantly foreshadowing, especially for someone who knows the myths. And I mean, this is a popular retelling. Lots of people, I think, by now know who Minth is, and they know that she gets turned into a mint plant. So for the author to just say that, like, "Ooh, I wish I could change you into a plant. I'm so annoyed at you," just felt like, oh my God, seriously. That is the only point in this book where I felt like that, though. So I may be like talking about how much I don't like Persephone's personification and this particular retelling with the horns and stuff, but seriously, I like the book. I mean, I read the whole thing. I plan on buying the rest of the series. So take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt, because I am definitely going to read more of this. I'm just telling you how I felt about it. And it just happens to be a myth that I really enjoy, so I have a lot to say about it, I guess. So I guess moving on to the good stuff. No, wait, there's one more thing I have to complain about very lightly, is that Persephone was given a mortal companion, like a friend that she moves in with. Like, it's a pretty common trope in the retellings of these, that Persephone has human friends and she moves in with them, like roommate situation, and they kind of guide her and show her humanity. I mean, they have their place in the story. But again, sometimes it doesn't feel like it's necessary for the plot. Like, I felt like you could have erased Persephone's human friends and still resulted in the end. It still had the end result. Like, the plot didn't change because of these human friends, or at least the plot didn't change because of these human friends in any way that I could discern. Excuse me. So, I don't know. I feel like maybe it just was maybe page fodder, like it gave you something to root for, some kind of friendship to latch onto, because again, that is also a trope in YA fiction where they have to have, the friend who they're roommates with, and the friend is quirky, and the friend does weird stuff, and kind of like, ha 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 ha, I wish I had a friend like that situations. But I don't feel like the friend relationship here changed the outcome of the plot at all. I felt like if you deleted those parts, the plot still would have ended up the way it ended up, so what was the point of the friend? Okay, now I'm done complaining. And again, take this complaint with a grain of salt, because I read it, I liked it, I'm gonna read more, and this means nothing about on the author, because what are the odds of the author's watching this? If the author is watching this, congratulations for writing a book. I mean, not only congratulations for writing this book, the author has written, I think it's 3 more in this particular series, and then Hades has his own spin-off, and there's another 3 more there. So there's 4 in this one, and 3 in the next one, and holy shit, I mean, someone wrote 7 books. That is effing amazing. I mean, congratulations, really. So, reasons why people should read this book. It's a quick read. I think I finished this in 3 or 4 days, and it moves quickly, partially because it's, like, font's not super small. I mean, it's pretty large, it's easy. It's a lot smaller than it actually looks. The romance definitely keeps you turning, trying to get to the next page, find out if they do, if they don't situation. And if you love any kind of Persephone Hades myth, then it's definitely a version of worth picking up. I mean, I'm late to this game. This book came out in, man, I don't even know when this book came out. Let's look at the front forward here. 2019. So this book has been out for a while. So I'm late to the game. Obviously, I mean, there's basically 6 more books in this series, but it's obviously a popular one. I picked it up because there's a lot of good reviews on Amazon, and all the reviews, none of them seem to touch on what I was saying about it. It was all like pretty stuff like, oh, I love this, it's my favorite retelling, etc., etc. So a lot of people obviously really like this book, and I quite enjoyed this book. If you are, however, interested in the Persephone Hades, I don't know, myth retelling, my favorite retelling is Lore Olympus. I'm sure a lot of you are already familiar with that, but in case you're not, Lore Olympus is a webcomic, and you can find it on the web. It's very easily. They also have 2 or 3 printings now of the story. Like the webcomic has been broken up, and, well, not really broken up, the webcomic has been published in sections as the webcomic evolves. So if you want a physical copy, I own the physical copies because that's who I am. I actually think I found it first on physical copy at, like, Target of all places. But in any case, if you're a fan of the Persephone and Hades retellings, then that is my own personal favorite retelling in print format, I think, at the moment. The other one, obviously, would be the fan fiction I was just talking about, but I'm not sure if it still exists. If it does, though, I will definitely include the link, and then you can go read it on fanfiction.net. So, that's what I felt about A Touch of Darkness. Am I going to read the next ones? Yes. Do I recommend it? Yes. I can't really think any negatives in this situation. It was a good book, if you can overlook the bits that don't matter to the plot, which I think a lot of readers aren't going to care about, and I only care about because I'm also a writer myself, and it's just a personal pet peeve. So you can ignore all of that if that's how you feel about that kind of thing. So in a couple of weeks, I'll be releasing what I am reading in October, and you can let me know then which one of those books you want me to do one of these kind of style talk about how I felt about the book things. My goal is to read a book a week for the rest of this year and into next year. I used to be a very voracious reader, and then, I don't know, life got crazy and I got out of it because, I don't know, I had 2 kids back to back, and then I started writing, and you know how life just kind of compiles on itself, and some things get dropped. But I'm making it a point, get up at 5 a.m., read my books. It's been wonderful so far, in case anybody's interested. So in a couple weeks, I'll be putting out what I'm going to be reading in October, and then we can talk about which one of those books you want to hear about. Okay, thank you for getting to the end of this very rambly kind of video. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you next week. Bye, folks.